Greetings, viewer. Follow up, a part 2 on my last post, Victory at Sea and War at Sea board games. What's the difference? I did put a little comment under that previous video. One mistake I did make, I spoke about the German, or the Axis, and the Allied airstrike marker being able to be placed in the North Sea. Indeed, the Axis marker can now attack any ships in the UK ports, as the Allied marker can attack ships in Germany. I quoted such as a war at sea rule. That's incorrect. This is another new rule that is purely a victory at sea rule. A subtle but nonetheless important rule change. Now, let me zoom in, probably not. In the sequence of play, Victory at Sea does something a little different that I think adds a lot of tension to the game and is a good addition. And that is that when you're moving ships to sea, you don't make your dice rolls for ships trying to move to sea areas basically until everything else is placed. Now, if you can read that there, can we zoom in a bit? Okay, my poor old rule set's a bit battered. So, step 2, you move your Italian ships to sea. Step 3, you move your Allied ships to sea. And step 4, you move all your German ships, U-boats, etc. Now there is another step, not listed here, but that happens in turn 2. That's where the British Home Fleet can sail from port. But that's not the important thing that I'm talking about. So you've moved all your ships. Now what happens is you only move the ships moving one sea area, and any ship moving to sea area, it gets put on the border of where you're trying to get it to. You don't make a speed roll when you're moving that ship, not initially. That now happens after everyone has moved their one sea area move ships, after the removal of control flags from the previous turn, after both players have rolled for U-boat technology, after both players have placed their airstrike marker, and it's only then at step 8, just before combat, that you make the speed rolls for ships moving to areas. Now in War at Sea, the British player or the Allied player would move all the ships. Let's give you an example. Trying to say the British player's moving, it's early in the war, early in the game, the British player's trying to move 2 sea areas up to the Barents Sea. Now he might send, just for argument's sake, Ark Royal. That's got a speed of 7. That simply cannot fail a speed roll. Hood, 7. You know that can't fail the speed roll. And let's say 2 heavy cruisers. What have we got here? I've got 3. We've got Norfolk and Cumberland. We'll put those there. Now, but also, the British player thinks, I might try and see if I can get two of these 4-4 ships there. See how that goes. And he puts those. Now what you do is you put them on the border as if they're trying to move. Now we know they're going to make it. And this would be the same, say, if these ships were coming from Murmansk, they'd only have to, that would make a speed roll, but you're trying to get these 444 battleships up there. Now, you don't make the speed roll as you would in War at Sea. You would make the speed roll for those two now. Now, in Victory at Sea, you don't. First off, the German has to make a move. Now, the German might look at that, and they're going, okay, 2 cruisers, a battleship, and the Ark Royal. We might start, say, with 2 of the pocket battleships, and then we might say, okay, and then the 2 heavy cruisers up there to match that. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because the German player is suddenly thinking, well, hang on, what happens if either of those British battleships make their speed rolls? What happens if both those British battleships get there? So the German player might think, just to be on the safe side, we'll put Scharnhorst there. Now, of course, every ship that the German player is sending up there is less to be spent, or less ships available, not spent, less ships available to be sent into other sea areas. And it's only after everyone's placed their ships that then you make the speed roll. So it does add to that tension in the game. It's just a small change, very subtle, just that slight change in the sequence of play, but it does make a difference. Right, another important change, I think, the Italian fleet, the Regia Marina. In War at Sea, if the Italians control the Mediterranean for 4 consecutive turns, they don't surrender, they stay in the game for the full 8 turns as an Axis fleet. If they don't control the Mediterranean for 4 consecutive turns, then Italy automatically surrenders on turn 8, and you make dice rolls to see which Italian ships will come over to the Allies, which will be scuttled, and which will continue fighting for the Axis forces. In Victory at Sea, the Italian surrender conditions are slightly different. At the start of turn 7, if the Mediterranean was Allied controlled on turn 6, roll 1 dice. 1 to 3, Italy surrenders. If this happens, roll 1 dice for each Italian ship. 1 to 2, the ship goes to the Allies. 3, the ship is scuttled and removed from play. 4 to 6, the ship goes to the Axis. The Roma and Impero are scuttled if not in the game on the turn of surrender. Now, just coming over here, we've got the Roma and Impero, fairly good battleships, 466. The Roma normally enters on turn 8, the Impero on turn 7. Now, if Italy surrenders at any stage, if either of these ships are not actually in the game by that point, they're just automatically scuttled. Now, at the start of turn 8, Italy surrenders unless the Axis control the Mediterranean. Effect as above. So in other words, if the Italians didn't actually have control of the Mediterranean at the end of turn 7, they will surrender, and then we'll go through those steps as I just spoke about before. It doesn't say it has to be Allied controlled, so it could be no one controls it. But yes, so turn 8, start of turn 8, Italy surrenders unless the Axis were already in control of the Mediterranean, i.e. at the end of turn 7. Turn 9, all bets are off. Italy surrenders automatically, effect as above. Now, the only thing that can change that, and I mentioned on the previous video, that if the Axis are doing so well that they get to 7 points in front. If the Axis are doing so well that they get to 7 points in front, then, as I mentioned on that video, neither France nor Italy, now France is just a port, but Italy will not surrender, no matter what. Okay. Alrighty. Let's pause it there, do some editing, and move on to the next part. For what it's worth, I had a bit of a squiz around on good old Board Game Geek. A couple of rules queries that came up. Now, I don't have the new version by Compass Games. I can only go by the rules that I've got, which is Jedco. But there were a couple of things, even with the Jedco version, that cropped up that sort of had us thinking a bit. But anyway, for what it's worth, my answers to the queries raised on Board Game Geek, or two of them anyway. One was caused by the way the Port of France is portrayed on the map. Now, strictly speaking, looking at that map, or looking at the map board, it looks like France, the Port of France, borders both the South Atlantic and the North Sea. So the rule actually states it to be subject to either the mines or the guns at Gibraltar. An Axis ship must be passing from the North Sea to the South Atlantic, or vice versa, or from the South Atlantic to the Mediterranean, and vice versa. Now, the South Atlantic and Mediterranean, not a problem, fairly straightforward. The problem is here, the way the Port of France is situated. Can an Axis ship in France, the Port of France, move directly to the North Sea? Or does it have to put to sea in the South Atlantic first and then go to the North Sea? Now, if it's moving directly from France into the North Sea, strictly speaking, as per the rules as written, it would be not subject to the coastal defences in the English Channel. We basically decided no, that a move from France to the North Sea was in effect a two-area move. The Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, I believe, were based in Brest, which is, I'm not particularly great on geography, but I think is over here somewhere. So we moved that from the Port of France, we ruled that from the Port of France, an Axis ship can't move directly into the North Sea. And as I say, using history, the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were based in Brest, which I think is about where the end of the tip of the ruler is. Not exactly sure where Saint Nazaire is, but we said no, you can't, Axis ships can't move directly from France into the North Sea. They've got to go via the South Atlantic and therefore be subject to the coastal defence on the English Channel. Another query I noticed on the Board Game Geek, it was asking, now just a metaphorical example. Now say you've got Graf Spee 225, Blucher 127, Scharnhorst 357, and they're in the South Atlantic Ocean. And the query was on Board Game Geek. Now, there's a rule by German pocket battleships can form as a lone raider. It can be subject to all sorts of special rules and Doesn't necessarily have to take part in combat. I think I covered it in the previous video, and people were asking if you had those 3 ships in the South Atlantic, just as an example, or any group of ships, could you break off one of the pocket battleships and declare it a lone raider? A bit baffled by this one, because to us, well, my 2 mates, we're not here anymore. They're not here anymore. Unkind people would say I'm not here anymore. But no, I'm a bit, again, I don't have the compass rules, so I'm a bit puzzled by that. To us, lone German pocket battleships in the Caribbean Sea, the North or South Atlantic Ocean, have the option before any combat to declare themselves to be a raider. To us, that was fairly clear. No, it had to be just a single German pocket battleship in that sea area to declare itself a raider. Now, of course, you can make up your own minds about that and come up with any rule you want, really. Anyway, let's just have a quick look at different Allied setup between War at Sea and Victory at Sea, and the rules that made us change that deployment. When War at Sea first came out, a very popular strategy amongst Allied players was to ignore the Mediterranean, at least for the first 2, 3, 4 turns. So my standard War at Sea setup, just to explain. So we're ignore the fact this is the Victory at Sea board. The Caribbean Sea doesn't exist. In the North Sea, the Allies get 1 POC, the Axis get 3. So first turn, what the Allies would tend to do would be ships in the Barents, North Sea, North Atlantic and South Atlantic. We would avoid the Mediterranean like a plague. We might put the air marker down there to try and gradually, hopefully, whittle away at those Italian battleships. And then only later on would we send ships down, hopefully after we'd reduced the German strength and perhaps when the US had come into the war. Hopefully, because remember the US, they just didn't automatically come in. They had a roll. They had to roll a 6, or the next turn a 5 or a 6, or the next turn a 4, 5 or a 6. Very, very frustrating. So you weren't guaranteed. So you really had to preserve the British fleet and try and knock down the Germans as much as you could, and hope that your air unit might knock around a few Italian units. You couldn't stay out of the Italian Mediterranean forever, because of course if they controlled that for 4 turns in a row, that meant Italy wasn't going to surrender on turn 8. So the theory was you split up your ships as I described, and potentially that will get you 1, 2, 3, 4 points of control. The Baltic Sea would not be contested, so the Germans could plonk something there. That would get them 1, and presumably the Italians in the Mediterranean, that would get them another 2. So it would be 4 points of control to 3. So the idea was that you would force the Germans basically to come out and fight. Okay, and the disposition would look something like this. Okay, so something like this. See if I can't zoom in maybe. Okay, so something like this. Now you'd hold on to your airstrike marker, because you can put that a bit later, but you would either put it in the Mediterranean Sea, as I say, to try and whittle the Italians, or you might put it up in the North Sea. Actually, no, you couldn't put it in the North Sea. You're not allowed. So yes, it would be down here in the Mediterranean. Sorry, I'm getting getting my rule systems confused already. So up here in the Barents, as many 7-speed ships as possible. So you would have the Hood, the Ark Royal, Kent, Cumberland and Norfolk, for example. And I would be trying to get the 2 next best speed ships, the Renown and Repulse with a speed of 6 up there. Pretty unlucky. It did happen, but be unlucky not to get both up there, or at the very least one. In the North Sea, you really want to control that. So you've got your 2 best battleships, Rodney and Nelson. Then 2 of the 4-4. Now it doesn't matter whether they're 4-4-3 or 4-4-4, as long as you've got hitting power there. And usually I'd pop a couple of cruisers. Likewise in the North and South Atlantic, a carrier. Most important, give you 3 anti-submarine warfare points. All the carriers do. And then we've got 4 lots of 4 firing factor battleships and a cruiser. And then vaguely similar down here. This one's got an extra cruiser in it, just in case the Italians come swanning out of the Med. And yes, of course, the British Air Force there to try and slowly whittle down some of that Italian strength before the British have to go in there. Used to grow nettles under our tongue that the Italians could sail so easily and freely, and these factors of the older Italian battleships, 4-3-5, you might notice if you look closely on Letraset, I've put a 3 there. Later variants reduced the attack factor on these older battleships to 3, which I totally agree with and I think is far more accurate. But yeah, it used to go nettles under our tongue that the Italians could be so bold and strong. But I guess, they could have been in real life, not limited by fuel. But the idea, and please, this isn't me telling you what to do, how you should have been playing or whatever. It was simply de rigueur at the time. The idea in this initial opening was avoiding 6-4, 24 lots of shots coming from the Italian battleships, and trying to lure the Germans out to at least contest one sea area, so that you could wear down the Germans a bit. The ideal German position would be to stay in base, build up strength, wait for the Bismarck, perhaps even the Tirpitz, build up the U-boat strength, and then, really come out and clean the British clock, and then it was pretty much game over. In terms of anti-submarine warfare, you've still got a myriad of shots. Remember, on the first turn, the U-boats, the Germans have only got 3 U-boats, and they're sunk or disabled on a 5 or a 6. Now over here, for example, in the North Atlantic, so you've got 3 anti-submarine factors for the carrier, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 8. Up here, what do we got? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you've got sort of between 8 and 9 factors in each sea area. So if you're disabling or sinking U-boats, roughly 1 in 3, so a 5 or 6 on the die. So that's a third of 8 or 9. So even if the Germans mass their 3 U-boats in one area, hopefully you might knock them out or knock them all out. Those of you who doubt my memory and veracity about how WASP players used to ignore the Mediterranean initially, I can only refer you to, hang on, we'll stop it. As an example, I would refer you to the General, May-June 1980, Volume 17, Number 1, a War at Sea replay with Don Greenwood, who was the Grand Poobah at Avalon Hill, commentating on a game between Alan R. Moon as the Axis and Richard Hamblin, who went on, of course, to design Victory in the Pacific. Richard Hamblin as the Allies, and the idea was to showcase a Mediterranean strategy, in which case try and encourage players to contest the Mediterranean on early in the War at Sea game. Suffice to say, it didn't go well. If I can find Don Greenwood's comment, yes, if you look there in summary, if I can hold it steady, or even if you just listen. And so the Mediterranean strategy sinks beneath the waves for another year. Actually, I hope my commentary showed how the Med strategy might have succeeded on another day. Just as a sidebar to that too, one of the things that often puzzles me when I see more modern reviews of War at Sea, people are often complaining, how the hell do the Axis win? Well, going back 40, 50 years ago, the view was exactly the opposite. How the hell do the Allies win? But anyway, so that would be sort of a standard setup that we would do for a War at Sea game. Try and wear down the Germans, control this part of the board when the Germans are worn down, and hopefully when the air marker has worn down the Italians a bit, then we'd start heading into the Mediterranean, because, as I say, those 24 shots from those Italian battleships are just murder. And you can't rely on the American ships coming into the game. And remember, I'm talking War at Sea here, not Victory at Sea. All right, let's have a look at how the rules changed our setup for Victory at Sea. I think made it, our setup, initial setup anyway, a lot more historical. Right, so for Victory at Sea, almost forces the British player to make a big commitment to the Mediterranean. Remember, in Victory at Sea, the only ships that can move to sea areas are the heavy cruisers. So if I tried to repeat my War at Sea deployment, the only thing I could put up here in the Barents Sea would be the 8 cruisers. Now that's asking for trouble. We don't get a point for controlling the North Sea. We do want to block it, but we don't pick up a point for there, so we're not forcing the Germans out. And down here in the Mediterranean, by at least having one battleship there, I've actually put all 5 of the 444 class there. That prevents the Italian battleships sailing out into the South Atlantic. And the rule states that the Italian cruisers can only sail out into the South Atlantic if Italy controls the Mediterranean Sea. So you can see it's a completely different setup. Now, likewise, of course, the Germans, now they can put 2 German pocket battleships there. They can't put that into the Baltic Sea. So you would have to, what would you put in there? You'd probably put one of the 127s, even though it's got a good speed. You'd put one of the heavy cruisers there to get your point, because you can't. Now these, as I mentioned, these pocket battleships here can pretty much show up in any sea area except the Baltic. So you need something patrolling the Baltic there. And then the Germans got what? You've got this here, you've got the 3 U-boats. The Bismarck, the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, one of the pocket battleships and one of the heavy cruisers. Now you've got to have something here in the Barents Sea. So I would probably, if I'm the German player, just a bit of historicalism here, I'd probably put the Admiral Scheer up in the Barents. The Graf Spee I would use as a single ship, trying to be a raider in the South Atlantic. Of course, the Italians have to move first. Now, there would be absolutely no point them not coming out in absolute force down in the Med. Now, if the German player, Axis player, could play it safe, he could put all these spare surface ships up here in the Barents Sea. The U-boats, you could risk them in the North Atlantic maybe. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just slightly better in the North Atlantic. And remember, the Allies don't get a point of control for controlling the North Sea. So I'd probably do something like that. Yes, I realise I should have moved the Italians first, but yeah, you get the idea. The Graf Spee would use the lone raider rules. The 3 U-boats there in the North Atlantic. I'd put conserving the German fleet for when the big heavies, the Bismarck and the Tirpitz arrive, put them in the Barents, them in the Baltic. So you can see they've got 2, 3, as opposed to 1, 2. Or potentially even better than 1, 2, depending on what happened here. So the Germans have already, or the Axis have already got 3 POC here. And then the British down here would have a decision to make. Do we come out and fight? Which, they will. Forgive my big ugly arm in the way. And given we're a bit up against it there, we'd probably put our air module there. Germans could place theirs in the North Sea, or they could send it down to support the Italians in the Mediterranean. Now we've committed Hood, Repulse and Renown. Now, unfortunately, about the only thing they're going to be able to do is, after 1 turn of combat, try and intercept the Graf Spee. So that's, again, I'm not trying to tell you, look, this is how you play the game, but just give you an example of our thinking and how we played the games, and how the initial setup in particular changed to what myself and my friends felt was a slightly more historical start. Okay. All right, well, as a garrulous old chook, I've piffled on for far too long. But as a cranky old man and a misanthrope, I don't care. All right, we'll leave War at Sea and Victory at Sea there. Please, again, if you think I've missed something, if you really want to point something out, please put something in the comments below if you think I've got something wrong, etc., or even if you've just got a query, and I'll do my best to answer it. We'll do this in another video, War at Sea 2, the differences between that and War at Sea. Now, this could get a little confusing. War at Sea, released by Jedco in 1975, re-released by Avalon Hill in 76. War at Sea 2 was released in 1977, according to the Board Game Geek. I didn't actually pick up my copy until the early 1980s, probably 1982, maybe 1983. Victory at Sea didn't come out until 1992. So in a sense, we're almost going back. A lot more to say about War at Sea 2. We'll run through the changes that they made. I've got to be honest, I was a little disappointed. In fact, I was a lot disappointed at War at Sea 2. I think it suffered from being produced too early. It tried to include a lot of the variants that included in the general magazine. Now, unfortunately, I think it missed several of the best suggestions and variants that came later. But more of that when we have a look at War at Sea 2. All right, there you have it. Take care, everyone. More again soon. Those of you waiting for me to get back to the miniatures and who have watched this, God bless you. More strength and patience than I've got. My work on those is coming, I know, so's Christmas, but we'll get back to that shortly. All right, thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye for now.